Okay, sorry.
Corey, you're muted.
Oh, here we go. Look, there we go. I'm over here talking. So again, hello everyone. How is everyone doing? We want to welcome everyone, all of our attendees here, and all of our participants and friends and relations that are viewing on Facebook. We want to say hello to everyone and thank you for joining us for the second webinar in the Leading Indigenous Thinkers series. So today's webinar is going to be focused more around our undergraduate experiences. And so I am grateful today to be joined here by student professionals, student affairs professionals, and students who are going to kind of share story and share experiences and best practices about transitioning to college life, about transitioning and getting engaged on your campus, about mentoring and all kind of different things. And so for those that are joining us live here in the webinar, you are more than welcome to use the chat feature. You are more than welcome to use the chat feature here. For those that are with us on Facebook Live, you can ask questions directly on Facebook Live, and we have our team members who are monitoring that, and they will be able to send your questions to us directly. So feel free to ask questions as we're going through. This whole webinar is set up more as a conversation, as a way for us to kind of engage in what's going on right now and kind of helping students prepare, as many of you have already started college and kind of the first weekend. Many of you are about to start this week or next week or in the coming week. And you know, a lot of times we understand that transitioning into higher ed or coming in as a first-year student in college can be difficult. It can be tough, it can be scary, it can be uncertain, but it's also probably one of the best experiences you'll ever have. You know, there's going to be a lot of ups, there's going to be a lot of downs, but again, we have a group of people here today that are going to do an outstanding job, who have been working in the field, who have lived experiences in what's going on. And so first off, I want to just do a quick introduction of our three professional panelists that will start off the webinar. So our three professional panelists here today are Tiffany Kelly, Melissa Yazzie, and Michael Bates. And so real quick, Tiffany Kelly is an enrolled citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. She serves as the Assistant Director in the Native American Cultural Center at Colorado State University. She also serves as the co-chair for Native American Advisory Council to the President at CSU, and is the co-chair for NASPA's Indigenous People Knowledge Community. Tiffany holds a Master's of Science in Student Affairs and Higher Education. Melissa Yazzie is a citizen of the Navajo Nation. She is currently the Assistant Director of the Harvard Project on American Indian Economic Development at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Melissa holds a Master's of Social Work with a concentration in American Indian and Alaska Native population. And our final professional panelist today will be Michael Bates. Michael is an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation. He currently serves as an academic advisor for American Indian Graduate Center and is a Gates Millennium Scholar of the 2008 cohort. Michael holds a Master's of Education in School Administration. So very quickly, that's their professional bio that I wrote up real quick, but I want to give each of our professional panelists just a few minutes to kind of further introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Tiffany. So Tiffany, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself and say hello to all of our attendees and viewers.
Thanks, Corey. Halito, hello everyone. My name is Tiffany Kelly. Like Corey said, my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. Born and raised though in Colorado, and went to school at Colorado State University. So I've been at CSU for, I won't tell you how many years, quite a while. CSU is in Fort Collins, Colorado. It occupies the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute Nations and Peoples. And I work in our Native American Cultural Center there. That's what I've been doing as a professional since I graduated back in 2014 with my master's. And let's see, I'm a first-gen student, I'm multiracial. I'm passionate about Indigenous education and working with Native students and working in our community. So I'm excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here with us, Tiffany. Melissa, would you kind of further introduce yourself?
Yes, yeah. Hey everyone, my name is Melissa Yazzie. Like Corey said, I'm a citizen of the Navajo Nation. I speak to you today from the ancestral homelands of the Massachusetts people in what is today Boston, Massachusetts. A little bit of my undergrad experience. I attended the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs, poli-sci major. I can relate to people who might be non-traditional students because that was very much my story from undergrad into graduate school. And I'm now pursuing another master's, which is crazy. So I understand that some of you on the panel might not be like fresh out of high school experience-wise, and that's totally okay. It took me 6 years to get my bachelor's degree, so I can relate to, you know, a totally non-linear sort of path for education. So just thank you AAGC for supporting me through school and for inviting me to this panel. It's an honor to meet all of you today.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And then last but certainly not least, I'd like to turn it over to Michael for him to kind of give us a little broader introduction on himself and what he does here at AIGC.
Thanks, Dr. Steele. Yeah, like Corey said, my name is Michael Bates. I originally studied at the University of Oklahoma. I ultimately graduated from Northeastern State University in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, with my bachelor's in science education and my master's in school administration. So my goal was to, work with middle school, high school students, and quickly found my passion with college students. So I came on at the American Indian Graduate Center about 5 years ago. I haven't looked back. I've been here for 5 years now in Albuquerque. Well, I work with students, freshmen all the way through PhD students, help them with adapting to the college environment, academic advising, preparing for graduate school and things like that. So I've pretty much seen it all.
Thank you so much, Michael. So really, I just want us to jump right in. And kind of where I want to kind of start is the transition into college life. It's sometimes that's something that can be, again, like we said, scary. It can be unpredictable. It could be exciting. There's all these different emotions going on right now, especially with the new generation of first years that are beginning their higher ed journey. So if you all could just kind of talk to some of the best practices that you all see, the do's or the don'ts of transitioning into college life. And we'll just open this up to any of the professional panelists to go ahead and kind of start sharing your wisdom with us.
I'll kick it off. I've been reflecting a lot on the last 6 months and what you all must have gone through if you're fresh out of high school, transitioning to virtual learning. And if you're entering a virtual learning scenario in college right now, there are some real strengths that you walk into this situation with. So in terms of transitioning from high school to college when it's all still virtual, I think there's a lot that you can do to set yourself up for success so that you can address that there's going to be a different workload and different expectations of you going into it. So just to kick off thinking about COVID, you had to adjust your home life, your whole family, to creating a space at home that is like a classroom, is a library, is a work study corner. So think back on how that worked for you. Think back on what worked, and then also what didn't work, and how can you, as like a household now, think about ways to adjust that so that you can set yourself up for success. And what I mean is, let's talk about the Wi-Fi bandwidth. Talk about how many users can be on Wi-Fi streaming Netflix, Spotify, TikToking, YouTubing, while you have to be in class. And then there might be other people in your household too, little siblings and cousins and whatever, or other college students who need that Wi-Fi bandwidth. I'm in a household of 2, and if I'm on my cell phone, if I'm on my laptop, I got Netflix going and my husband's gaming, then somebody is having connectivity issues, and you start barking at each other about it. And so that's 4 devices on a pretty strong Wi-Fi network. I can't imagine having a household full of users. So, it's going to take some sacrifice, but I think starting off with a healthy conversation as a household, laying out everybody's schedule. Maybe you have little siblings who have to be in class, 4 hours a day nonstop, or whatever it looks like. How will you all be able to support and create classroom supportive experience and study space, quiet time, all of that. You have the spring and the summer to look back on to see what worked and what didn't work. This is just going to help set you up for success. And I'll just kick it off at that.
I think that brings up a really good point, because we are in an unprecedented time right now with, most higher education institutions have gone virtual. And one of the biggest things, though, is students who don't have access to internet or broadband or things like that. And I want to be able to provide some resources for them. So if you find yourself in that situation, we have a lot of links on our website at aigcs.org. If you go to our student resource page, we have a whole page there that talks about COVID, or college during COVID. And we have sections and resources under there. So if you're a student who's facing issues with accessing the Wi-Fi and things like that, definitely go check that out, because there's a lot of companies out there right now who are working with students, who are working with families to provide affordable access to Wi-Fi and internet as best as they can. So I think that's a great point that you brought up, Melissa. Tiffany or Michael, do y'all want to kind of chime in and add anything? Michael?
Yeah, I'll kind of reiterate, definitely, when everybody's, like Melissa said, trying to log in at the same time, that's not good. One thing that I could talk about the don'ts all day, but we won't go into that. But as far as the do's, time management was something I really struggled with. I definitely found that a physical planner helped me a lot. I tried doing a planner on my cell phone, but it was too easy for me to just swipe the notifications away and ignore them. So I definitely recommend, a physical planner. And, if you are in a household where a lot of people do need that Wi-Fi broadband access all at once, maybe have one of those dry erase calendars and write, time frames of who needs it exactly when. And if there's flexible times, try to take advantage of when people aren't using that broadband.
I think that's a great suggestion too. Even I'll be the first to admit, I try to use the physical planners, but I'm not the best at it. So even like using your phones and things like that too, for more of our techie students who are technologically more advanced, who can use that. I've seen some students who have created a whole schedule chart off of an Excel sheet, and it's all color coded. And I look at that and my eyes get real big sometimes. But you got to find, I think most of us can agree, you got to find what works for you. You got to find that, especially with time management skills, you really got to find the ease and the things that work for you. Tiffany, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I echo all of that. And those were some of the things that I wrote down. I think I'm biased because I work in a cultural center that supports Native students. And so I definitely think one of my big do's for new students and even returners, if you weren't as involved, is if your campus has a cultural center, like a Native cultural center, American Indian Studies, or even a multicultural center, seek that out, because we're trying to figure out, like, how do we serve our students in a virtual way? And so a lot of our programming is going to be virtual things just like this, where it's tips and tricks, and let's talk about time management. And maybe it's all structured around that. So we're talking, I was the person that also liked a paper physical planner that I could hold. It somehow held me more responsible than my phone. Or right, like figuring out what works for you. And I know we'll talk a little bit about mentoring later and finding your community, but I think, the sooner you can get involved, I think it just helps create a little bit more of a seamless transition and helps you meet students and get connected to clubs and just make friends differently. And it's definitely going to be challenging doing that online. And we've been saying, since the spring when our university went virtual, is as Native and Indigenous peoples, we're very community and relationally like focused. And so doing this virtually has been tough. It's really, really hard to not physically be with each other, sitting around, having lunch, hanging out. It's been different. And so I think, but still trying to find that community on your campus so that you can get connected. And then you can start to get tips and tricks from returning students, upperclassmen, grad students, faculty, all of those things. And I think then having that community behind you is going to help you be successful in the classroom, because you have people you can ask questions to and people that have got your back that you can kind of fall back on if you're having bumps in the road. And the other thing that I wanted to mention that Melissa brought up around, well, actually everyone talked about it, but like the Wi-Fi and some of that stuff is, like in our office, we have some like emergency funds that we can support students and stuff like that. And like, I know our student financial aid office also has emergency funds that students can apply to. And like, I didn't know that as a student. I didn't know you could ask the financial aid office, like, what more, like, not what more do you have, but are there like opportunities or things for people in crisis or stuff like this? And so we're like asking, like, how would you know that, right? And so asking the Native Center, the Multicultural Center, upper class students to get connected to some of those places to see, is there like additional funding that I can apply for to help me, you know, purchase a laptop to be at home, or, you know, help out with the Wi-Fi or things like that. And I think if, you know, if you're not involved and you don't know that, you may never learn those things. And so I think that's also another really great way and reason to get involved, is there's like untapped resources that you just may not know about, especially for our first generation students, right? We don't know how to ask the questions because we don't even know that those things exist. So how would we even know to ask a question? And hopefully upper class students and faculty members that you get connected with can help you do that.
I think to add on to that, Tiffany, I really love how you started mentioning different offices across campus. And for those of you who are virtual, or you're all first year students, right? Whether you're in person or virtual, get familiar now with your student portal. And it might be called, you know, your intranet. It might be called campus links, you know, something like that. I'm going to call it your student portal. This is, you know, use your unique user ID and that password that you created. And this is your like all things like important place to go to. It has every office on campus will have their website inside there, phone numbers, emails, who, faces, what do they do? I want you in there. I want you getting very familiar with your student portal, reading, you know, what does this office do? What can they provide? How do I make an appointment with them? This is how you're going to find out when it's time to register for classes. This is how you find out if you're off a wait list. With the registrar page. This is where you find out so much information. And I know we'll go into talking about, you know, how do you get involved and connected in a virtual crazy setting. This is your lifeline, just as much as your student email. I know you have an email already. You probably have like 2 or 3 emails. I have like way too many emails with thousands of unread emails. I get it. It's a lot to sort of manage. And keep up on, but your student email, don't avoid it. Get familiar with that stuff now before you get into the start of your term, or if you're just starting now. Let's say your professor is only an email sort of communicator. You know, they don't text. I don't know if teachers text, but if that is how your professor is trying to communicate to you, hey guys, don't read this. I want you to read this, and we are all talking about it next class. And if you don't come prepared, you can't say, I didn't know. You have that information in your email. So just as you check your social, you know, 5, 6, 11 times a day, be in your email all the time. That's where you get info and important updates on, you know, student life and important deadlines and all of that. And you wouldn't know about emergency funds, like Tiffany was saying, or you can rent a laptop from your library, possibly. I know that's something that schools are providing right now. How would you know that if you didn't get in the portal and spend some time exploring? Yeah.
I definitely agree with what Melissa says there, because especially when we say read your emails. So if you're an American Indian Graduate Center scholar, you constantly get emails from us. And then one of the other things that you said is understanding what resources you have available to you. For instance, AIGC currently offers a student emergency fund. So if you are currently a student who's facing some difficulties, you can reach out to our office and request to apply to these funds. And they're something that we were reaching out to our students all when this all first happened, and it's a fund and program that's still available for you. So you talk about those resources, you talk about being able to access your email, and I would also say being able to make sure that you're using the right emails. Make sure that you're checking the right emails. But I think, we all talked about this idea of community, and I think that's a perfect kind of segue into that next topic is, how do we begin to engage? Like, how do we begin to engage with not only our cultural centers, our, if you're fortunate enough to go to a university that has a Native American Student Life office or an American Indian Service office or something like that, how do you engage with those virtually? And what are some of the areas or offices that students should be engaging? Should they be engaging financial aid? Should they be meeting financial aid officers? Should they be meeting academic support? Things like that. What are some of your suggestions? We'll just start with, let's go, Michael.
Yeah, so I think the first thing with engaging with the online learning format, students can expect a lot less interaction with their professors. With on campus, you're seeing your professor every time you go to class, and the engagement's now the responsibility of the engagement is gonna fall more on the student now with the online learning format. So definitely reach out to your professors. I would start with that. You're gonna have a lot of best friends in college. You're like Dr. Steele said, your financial aid advisor, that's gonna be one of your best friends. Your advisor, that's gonna be a best friend. Your professors, there's a lot of people who are gonna help you succeed in your college career. So I would definitely recommend reaching out to those professors and financial aid. Another thing I think about is, with the online courses, there's different types of online courses and everyone has their own learning strategies and learning styles. So, some online courses, you got to think like you meet once a week or twice a week via Zoom meeting. You have to be there in person, physically online at a certain time. Whereas other professors might just, let you be more learn as you go and at your own pace kind of style. So another thing to think about when you're enrolling for these classes is, what type of online format are they? Those are just a few of the takeaways I have from that.
Thanks, Michael. And I think, you talked about the professors. I kind of like to give that example. I taught in higher ed for a number of years before joining AIGC. And one of the things I always told my students is, you utilize those office hours. Get to know your professor, because I guarantee you, if I knew who you were, I could remember you, because sometimes I would teach classes up to 120 students, if not more. And the actuality of me learning everyone's names and faces in that class was just going to be too great. But if you utilize and go check in with your office out, go check in the professor's office hours and be like, hi, my name's Corey. I just wanted to say hello. I'm in this section, or even asking the questions those office hours, building those relationships. Those relationships will come in handy and are critical, especially when you're going to be applying for future scholarships, when you're applying for future internships, future graduate programming. So I think that was a really good point to bring up, Michael. Melissa, do you have anything you want to add around this?
Yeah, I was just taking some notes. This makes me think so much about something that those of us in higher ed like cram our brains around, which is this idea of belonging. And how do we, because it's a two-way street. It's not like we're sitting here at our desks waiting for students to come. It's not just on you. How are we as administrators and also instructors creating a welcoming space for you as a student, letting you know that your voice, your unique perspective, your, worldview, and I'm talking to Indigenous people right now. How are you creating space for Indigenous people to feel like this campus is where I belong? Your programs, can resonate with my interests. And so this idea of belonging, I know it's like a weird sort of concept, but it's something that we sort of grapple with a lot in higher ed as administrators. And the way you can show up on the other end of that is getting in your student portal or walking, across campus and just getting familiar with campus. And reaching out to these different centers, these different services, these different offices. They're there to help you succeed. And I know you're going to hear that a gazillion times. But like the Career Center, for one, if you're not sure yet what you want to major in, or if you're sort of teetering between a few ideas, or you've got, your mom in one ear saying you are going to be a doctor, and you're like, I don't think so. The thing with the Career Center is they have something called assessments. They're not like intelligence tests or anything like that. They're assessments that just ask you certain questions. And the goal is to figure out, what are your real interests? Because the idea is that if we pursue things that we are really interested in, using our strengths, using what we're good at. If I was an introvert and I didn't like, I was really afraid of public speaking, I don't think I'm going to be, a theater major. I don't think I'm going to be, a big debate person, right? Those aren't my strengths. These assessments can help sort of tease out what you're really good at, and give you a few, like a couple major track ideas, as well as tell you these are the sort of jobs that you can pursue with this major. And it's just going to like open your mind. It's just going to, I think, blow your mind about what's possible within you, which is really, really super cool. I say the sooner someone can get into the career services office, the better. For those assessments, yes. But also you should, this is kind of crazy to think, your first year, be thinking about life after school, because that's going to come. You're not always going to be a college student, right? You're emerging on this exciting moment of freedom and becoming an adult. But that time will come and you're like, well, how did I prepare for this? What's a resume? And they have templates. They can sit with you and write all of this, write out a resume and apply for an official job with their help. So familiarize yourself, okay? And the more that you get engaged in that way, even in a virtual way, you can do like these Zoom sort of meetings, with these career counselors. The more you feel like you can do it, the more you identify resources for you, the more that you sort of say, I do belong here. Like, I'm going to do this. I have a path and I can see a way through. Going back to like classes, if you're in one of those, if you're in a big university and you're in your intro to sociology class, intro to chem, and you're one of like 120 kids in that classroom, like I've been in those live person lecture halls, right? I'm sure Tiffany has too at CSU, huge campuses. It's overwhelming. That professor does not have time to talk to all 120 of you. And so they have TAs or GAs. These are graduate assistants. These are teacher assistants who you probably will get assigned to. They will have their own office hours. And if you get lost at any point in the lectures, in your reading, in your assignments, take advantage of those office hours. The more you prepare yourself for upcoming tests, the more you engage with those assistants, the more resources you have at your disposal, and the better you'll perform. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Tiffany, do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, honestly, I think Melissa covered everything I was thinking of. And so, I mean, I just echo, right? Like, I've never done an online class, and so I can't even begin to think about how hard that transition is. And so I think my biggest advice and what we're talking about with students is, the more folks you've got in your community and in your corner, the more offices you've connected with, the more people that you've at least engaged with or emailed, your TAs, your faculty, the more likely you're going to be able to get your questions answered and feel supported and not feel like alone trying to figure this out, because everyone's doing this right now, right? We're open right now in person and doing like hybrid stuff, but we don't know what's going to happen. And so if we go full virtual again, everyone is kind of in that same boat. And so, right, if you're able to meet your professors, meet your TAs, go connect with one of the cultural centers or go to a student org meeting, right, then you can start to build that network of people. So when you've got questions and things are coming up and you just don't know how something works, or, oh, my professor keeps saying this like thing, I have no idea what that means and I don't want to ask, like, an upperclassman can be like, oh yeah, that's what this is, or that's what they mean when they say whatever, lingo that your campus uses or something like that. So yeah, I just echo everything that Michael and Melissa have said is, and it's hard. I mean, that's the other thing is I remember my first year on campus, and I didn't engage with our Native Center at all, which I tell that story a lot because I think it's funny now that I run a lot of the programs that I'm like, you need to be outreaching to the first year students. I'm like, I was the one that ignored my mentor because I had a lot of stuff around my identity and not feeling like I needed help. And I wasn't sure if I was like Native enough to be in those spaces, being a multiracial Native person. And so I kind of just pushed it off and found community in other places, thankfully, to help me get through my first year. But as soon as I got involved, I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I get involved sooner? And now I haven't left. And so I know that it's hard, and sometimes initiating those conversations, like, what do I email a professor? Like, hey, can we meet? That's right. That's hard. And you may not even know how to address an email or what you should say or how to do that. So again, I think just knowing that there's students out there that want to help you. They're in your student orgs, they're in the cultural and resource centers, the departments, like whatever it is that is a passion of yours that you like seek out those communities, they can help you with that and just alleviate some of the stress so that hopefully the only thing that's stressing you out is classes, but then you can like maneuver that. So.
All right, thank you all so much. So before we move to our last kind of question and talking point, I do want to point out, if you're listening to Facebook, if you're watching us on Facebook right now, there is a little bit of a lag. So if you want to go ahead and start asking your questions there for the professional panelists, we'll get to them at the Q&A session. And again, for those that are with us live here in the webinar, you can always feel free to use the Q&A or just directly to ask your question in the chat. So my last kind of question and kind of follow-up for our professionalists here are, we've talked about this idea of mentoring. We've talked about this idea of finding mentoring, finding community. How important is it to be able to find mentors? Or, how does someone even approach finding a mentor? And then also included in that is like, are there any like final things you'd like to, any other things, final thoughts that you'd want to give to students who might be listening or who might be watching later on Facebook that you want to share? And then I think we'll go ahead, Tiffany, we'll go back right to you.
Okay. Yeah, so I coordinate our structured formal peer mentoring program through our office. And so we talk about this a lot. We kind of just do outreach to students, so they have to know about us and hear from us, but I know that that's not the case on all campuses. So I think I circle back to what I said at the beginning, especially if you're looking for a mentor with like a similar racial identity as you, or something that's maybe salient for you in that way. Seek out, like ask what those offices are and see if they have a formal mentoring program. And if they don't have something that's formal where you're getting paired up with a mentor or something like that, ask about other opportunities for engagement. Because I think a lot of times that mentoring sometimes just happens organically and naturally once you start to build those relationships with other students, upperclassmen, the staff in that office, and even faculty. But I think I can't reaffirm like how much I believe in the mentoring programs and how I really do. When I tell our upper class mentors, I'm like, you all are our front lines of retention. Like I'm here and I meet with students and I can help provide the resources, but you all are the ones that are keeping them here because you're providing that community and that resource and that friendship to them that maybe they need in the moment, they only need for a little bit, maybe they need it for all 4 years, I don't know. But I really, really think it's important. And there's a lot of ways I think that you can go about maybe seeking out a mentor if you're looking for a professional mentor, maybe someone in your field of study, approaching faculty members to just try to get to know them. But I do think I think to me, it starts with relationships, just getting to know someone. Hey, can we have virtual coffee? And can I ask you about how you got to where you are? Why did you pick this major? Oh my gosh, you're a faculty member of Native American Studies. How did you do that? What did you study? And right, we all love to talk about ourselves. So I'm like, cool, let's have virtual coffee and I can tell you my story, right? Because then we're just building that relationship, and then I think it can evolve into more of that mentorship, either formal or informal, right? But I do think it's really, really important. So to either seek out, are there formal mentoring programs, which there typically are on most college campuses, whether it's related to like your Native and Indigenous identity or through another student org, or even like a first year mentoring program for first years on campus, right? There's those things that are in place. But if you don't want something that's not formal, I think that's where you start to kind of reach out to clubs or organizations to just start building those relationships.
And Tiffany, I think you talked about something very important when you talked about looking for mentoring programs. And then, I kind of just want to talk about real quick before I get to Melissa. American Indian Graduate Center actually next Monday, August 31st, is going to be launching our premier academic coaching program called the Rising Native Graduates. And the Rising Native Graduates program is going to be looking for Native undergrad juniors and seniors, right now specifically from the Northwest region, who are looking for mentors, who are looking for academic coaching, who are looking for to connect with those professionals, not just in higher ed, but across multiple fields. So, you talk about looking for mentoring programs within the college campus, but there's also a lot of mentoring programs outside the college campus too. So like I said, if you are a student listening, or students, if you're a professional who's joining in with us today and students in that Pacific Northwest area who are looking for those mentoring, we are going to be launching that on Monday. And hopefully our plan is to very soon, hopefully launching that everywhere. But as of right now, I think that's a big key piece. That's a big key piece when we talk about mentoring. We talk about finding those natural ways of connecting. So I appreciate that, Kelly. Melissa, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, 100% agree with Tiffany that there will be built-in mentoring programs likely in your school, and those will be upperclassmen, and those are really, really valuable, right? To give you sort of the unknowns, that you don't yet know about, sort of like the tricks of the trade, if you will. I think back to a mentor that I still have from undergrad, and it was from my involvement with the Native Student Organization. She was an alum, meaning she graduated from that school and stuck around in the area and stayed involved with the Native organization as like the at-large advisor. And she helped me write my graduate school, one of my reference letters. I still check in with her. And what it looked like when I was a student, I wasn't actively thinking about finding a mentor. I didn't know the value in it. But she was there, like she always showed up, just, had a presence. She was like, just like our solid, we can always count on Teresa being at our meetings and at our events and supporting us and giving us advice. And it's not like I, made like a personal, like I want to like sit down and learn your life and share and be crying on each other's shoulders. It was nothing like that. Though I'm sure she was there and ready to step into that role as an auntie, if need be. It was just that she was around and is still around. And the way I nurtured that relationship was connecting on Facebook, to be honest, and staying connected, giving updates from time to time, asking her, how are you doing? And so what I'm saying is maybe the mentor in your life isn't going to be a classmate or an upperclassman. Maybe it's somebody from high school. Maybe it's somebody in your church, in your community, an elder. Maybe it's, if only we could all attach ourselves to elders, then I think we'd be so solid in life. Maybe it's somebody from elementary school that just is always a cheerleader for you. And I think those are some of my final thoughts, that know who your cheerleaders are, know who's in your circle. And it may not be that you've always nurtured those relationships, but you do remember those people who came to your high school graduation, which might have been the drive-by graduation. But who are those people who have always, cared about you and asked about you, how you're doing? So know who your cheerleaders are, because like Corey kicked off, this call with, there will be times, that when things get rough, when you ask yourself, what am I doing? Do I belong here? I'm not getting the grades I thought I was going to get. I used to be an all-A student, and now what's happening? There are going to be those really rough patches. It happened to me. I struggled. Part of why it took 6 years through undergrad is because I was at a student in high school, and I struggled through undergrad. So know who your cheerleaders are. Go to them. It could be just the most simple, awkward email or phone call or text message where you're just like, hey, don't know if you remember me. My name's Melissa. Wondered if you're free. I just need someone to talk to. And if it's a professor, if it's someone on campus who you really admire, like what they do, I still have to do these emails to people who I don't know at this giant university, and I still get nerves. Hey, I just want to learn more about what you do and about your journey to get to where you are. Send. It's that simple, right? So know who your cheerleaders are. Those are my notes. Mentoring programs, we know that they work, right? As professionals, we know the value in connecting students with mentors, that you get engaged on campus. We know that means you're going to have a better chance at succeeding in school. So that's the purpose of this, right, Corey? This is why we're all here and why we all care. And if you need one person to tell you, that you can do it, this is us saying you can do it. So if nothing else, remember, our call here today.
I think that's important when you talked about remember who your cheerleaders are and who your support systems are, because sometimes you might not know who they are. I know I think back on my experience, and I had a professor who was always tough on me, and I always thought he hated me, and I always thought like, ooh, he was an Indian professor who I was like, oh, he was on me all the time. But at my senior year, he was like, I was on you all the time because I saw the potential you had. And he said, I was always advocating for you, whether you knew it or not. And so even it's sometimes those cheerleaders come in different, or those support systems come in different ways and forms. So I appreciate you saying that. Michael, do you have anything you want to add before? We do have one question right now in the Q&A that I'll ask afterwards, but Michael, I want to give you some time just to kind of say some final thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of this is kind of going to be redundant, but like Melissa said, you're going to hear these same things over and over and over because it's what works, So it's definitely important to find a mentor. I can speak from my experience. Like I too struggled my first few years of college, and I didn't get involved on campus. I didn't go to the multicultural center. I didn't get involved in any clubs or organizations. It was basically just like I went to class and I went to my dorm, and that was it. So I transferred my junior year, and I happened to meet a couple people when I transferred who really helped me navigate my new institution. One was an upperclassman, and one was the dean of the College of Education. Both of them just really took me under their wings, and I really credit a lot of my ability to succeed to them. They really transformed the way that I looked at college, and I really got more involved and things like that. Like they've said, you can get involved with communities, your tribal, spiritual leaders, Center for Tribal Studies, Multicultural Studies, a campus club or organization. And again, like I think it was Tiffany said, they have to be natural and organic. So, you can't force a mentorship, but it's also not possible if you don't put yourself in that position as well. They're not just going to come to you out of nowhere and say, hey, I want to be your mentor. It's a two-way street. Once you feel comfortable with someone, definitely, reach out to them and kind of nudge that and see if you can maybe form a mentorship out of it. See how things, fall and explore the opportunity. It could be a professor, upperclassman, your advisor, a community member, a professional, a family friend, an elder. I definitely like the idea of the elder too. But again, I was lucky, and both my mentors reached out to me, but I also put myself in that position. And so again, I credit a lot of my ability to succeed at my new institution to them.
All right, thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the questions that we kind of have here. So the first one I have, or the one I have here, is from Kimberly. And she's asking, what social media platforms do you most often reach out to your students or audience to? So what are some of the social media platforms that you use that you find most effective? See, Tiffany, I will kind of start with you.
I would say that we, for the most part, was kind of relying on Facebook until students told us they don't do that anymore. And so I've been trying to up our Instagram game. I'm still not great with Twitter because I don't personally like it. And we're a small office of a couple people. So we're the ones that are doing social media marketing amongst all the things. So we have our students who are putting together a video on TikTok, and I said, cool, just do it and send it to me and we'll share it because I don't know how to do that. So I think Facebook and Instagram probably the most for us. And then I think we rely still pretty heavily on email. So again, check those emails, check our websites. But we're trying to get better for sure.
Melissa, do you have any insight into that?
Yeah. So something else about the utility of going into your portal and checking your email. If you are 100% virtual right now, even if your campus is hybrid right now, and especially if you're in person, every student organization, every fraternity, sorority, every, what do you call it? Like societies, whatever, will participate in a student organization fair. That's at the beginning of every term. Maybe it's in the quad on the grass, it might be in a ballroom. Virtually, it's going to be in some sort of virtual sort of scenario. And so you're going to want to watch your portal for those events to happen. That's where you learn the exciting organizations on campus, on your campus. That's where you find out, is there a multicultural center here? Is there a Native American student club here? Is there, fill in the blank with any of your, academic interests? Is there we can't do intramurals now, but that's where you will find that out. So use your portal for that. I lost my train of thought. What was the question, Corey?
It was talking about what social media platforms that you most often use to reach your students.
Yes, and so especially in this virtual scenario, they're going to want to reach out to you and connect with you. They're going to share their different social channels with you, okay? So if it's not on the portal, if you don't find it somehow, through the various forms of the social media you're already a part of, the big ones from the main campus, that's where you can find it too. Everybody's going to be sharing their social media accounts. The ones we used when I did counseling and career services was Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook, because that's where we knew we'd reach students.
All right, thank you so much. Michael, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I try to cater to the students as much as I can. I mean, if they want to text me, that's fine. Call me on my cell phone, call me on my office phone, email me, Facebook Messenger. Basically, whichever way they want to communicate with, I try to adapt to that the best I can. And if I don't have that, I try to get it, that way. If that's their best means of communication, I try to communicate with them that way. We have some students who, maybe they don't have a cell phone, but they have WhatsApp or something like that. So they can, call through that rather than through the traditional, phone method. So that too is, of course, but I am going to push the student portal again. That's the easiest method for me to contact my students because when I'm working with a student, all their information that I'm seeing is in their student portal. So if they're messaging me through the student portal, I can see it all in real time at the same time while I'm working with them.
All right, thank you all. And I'll just take that time to kind of plug our social medias too. So you can always follow AIGC on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We're constantly out there spreading different resources that we find, spreading resources that we have, and with our partners that they share. So you can always use those social medias to help spread awareness and outreach to different students. So Michael, Tiffany, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today. We really do appreciate you all being here. And like I said, we appreciate you sharing story and sharing your experience and wisdom with all of our participants, both live right now on Zoom webinar, and those that are watching via Facebook and that will be watching as this stays on our social media platforms for a little while. So I just want to say thank you all again. And now I would like to bring in our student panelists. And so our student panelists today are Amara Webster and Cole Walker. And so Amara is an enrolled member of the Confederate Salish and Kootenai tribes. She's a recent graduate of Dartmouth College, and she's also a Gates Millennium Scholar from the cohort of 2015. She currently resides on the Flathead Indian Reservation, and Amara serves her tribe through the Lead for America Fellowship as a Climate Change Policy Fellow. Joining her today was also Cole Walker. Cole is a junior at the University of Oklahoma who's currently studying civil engineering. He has been an active part of his Native community there. He has served as the executive member on the American Indian Student Association, first as the freshman representative, and now currently as their treasurer. So again, I want to give both Cole and Amara time to kind of further introduce themselves. So Amara, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and, if you would, just introduce yourselves to our attendees and viewers on Facebook.
I can go ahead and start. But before I go ahead and start, I just want to let everyone know I've had a lot of work meetings this week, so I've been talking, and so I really do apologize. My voice is a little bit more raspy than normal. So pesia, chisatlich u catlispe, Amara Webster Louis Quest. Hello, everyone. My name is Amara Webster. I'm an enrolled member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. I am currently residing on my homelands, which is such a great blessing, especially after being away for so long. I am a 2019 graduate of Dartmouth College. I double majored in government and Native American studies. And prior to that, I'm actually a graduate of Chemawa Indian School. So I had been away for about 6 years before I had ended up coming home to work for my tribe. And so I'm a Lead for America Hometown Fellow, and my technical title is a Climate Change Policy Fellow, but I also work a lot on food sovereignty and food security. And I am a Gates Millennium Scholar from the 2015 cohort, and I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Amara. Cole, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit further?
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Cole Walker. As Corey said, I am a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. I currently attend the University of Oklahoma, where I'm studying civil engineering. One day I want to get my master's in structural engineering and possibly a doctorate in structures. And since my freshman year, I've been working at the structural engineers lab at the university, doing research in concrete and steel and different kinds of structures. And also this past summer, I had the opportunity to work with Boeing. I was an intern there. I did stress analysis on different interior design projects for Boeing. And so I've also served as the executive member of ASA, and ASA has been very important to me since my start in college. I pretty much joined ASA day one, and some of the mentors I've developed there have been very critical in some of these big steps I've been able to gain in my college career. And so I'm really excited to talk to you guys about that.
Thank you both for joining in today. We really do appreciate it. And so where I want to kind of begin with is really just kind of your experiences or your stories. If you remember back to that first year, that first day that you walked on campus, you came in, what were some of the things that you were feeling? What were some of the things that maybe overwhelmed you, or things that you had no idea what you were walking into? You thought you knew, but you didn't know. What was your story like as you started that? Cole, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah. So when I first came, I definitely developed like a new sense of independence. In a way, I was a bit lonely at first. I'd come from a little high school where I knew everybody and close to my family, and then I was far away from the family, far away from old friends. But that first week, I reached out and I got involved with ASA through that, what Melissa had talked about earlier, that where all the organizations gather up and they have us all on the campus together. And I met ASA there, and that's where I gained a lot of really good friends and some of those mentors. And that's why I think right when you're starting, it's very important to try to get involved as quick as you can into an organization that you're interested with, whether that be something with your academics or, something with your racial background. But just to find people that you are going to be able to connect with and people that you're going to be able to grow with in college.
Thank you, Amara.
Um, when I went to Dartmouth, I was pretty like shocked, you know. I grew up on reservation and then I ended up going to an all Indian boarding school. So I was definitely used to being around a lot of natives. And so if anyone knows anything about Dartmouth College, it is, while they do have a pretty large native population, there definitely were just so many different kinds of people that I wasn't used to. And I'm also a first generation and was a low income student at the time. And so I had never experienced such like massive wealth in one place. There's like a lot of, you know, very well-to-do students there and alumni. And it was really overwhelming in that respect. And like, also, I know that I had been away from home the last 2 years of my high school because I was in Salem, Oregon, but at the same time, like traveling from like Northwest Montana to the East Coast is such a different experience. And I thought that I wouldn't really have a lot of issues with homesickness, being that I had already been away and had a little bit of practice. But it was just so different. Everything about like the culture and the climate of like New England is just like, yeah, it was just such a interesting thing to experience, as well as just like oftentimes I was the first native person that anyone was meeting. And so with that comes a lot of like stereotypes and just weird comments, you know. So I was definitely overwhelmed. I really didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't really have anyone within my immediate family to be able to talk about what I should be expecting from college. Like, nevertheless, entering into an Ivy League institution. So I was definitely very, very overwhelmed, but ultimately I was able to find a lot of good connections and like friends that I still talk with like every day from within Dartmouth's native community. So that was really nice to be able to lean on them. So yeah.
So I think you both bring up a good point. You both kind of brought up, you know, leaving home, that disconnection from home and being, you know, that homesickness sometimes, and then also the culture shock. You know, because especially, whether if it's you're coming from an all native school, because I totally agree with that. I myself went to a BIE school, boarding school, and going from that all Indian school, or even going from a small town school to a large campus. How did you navigate that homesickness, that disconnect, and that culture shock? What were some of the ways that helped you, or resources that you used on campus to help you kind of navigate those? And Amira, I'm just going to pop it right back to you.
Oh, great. So like I said, Dartmouth does have a pretty large native student population. It's like 2%, which is like I think it ranges anywhere from 2 to 4%, which unfortunately is considered a large native population at any sort of school. So again, I really did lean on a lot of native community members and like tribal students there, which really helped me kind of just like find that common bridge. And one of my really good friends also was coming from like an all Indian boarding school. She went to Sequoia in Oklahoma. And so there was a lot of, like bridges that I was able to make with like a lot of students, which was great, particularly within the Native community, that made me feel super, super at home. And luckily Dartmouth does have like a pretty robust Native American program. So, they're definitely not new to a bunch of little res kids coming in and feeling homesick and trying to navigate, like what it means to be in an institution like that, while also combating so many things. Like, it's such a shock being away from your homelands, for sure, especially if you feel very like strongly about that and you're very connected to your community. And it's also like just like small things, of like someone said I talked funny, or someone didn't really quite understand like why I was smudging, or it's just all of like these little alienation things that kind of ultimately ended up building up for me. But I was able to find a lot of support, not only from within the Dartmouth Native community, but as well as like through the NAP. I got really active within that. I was a student intern, so I kind of helped bridge connections between Dartmouth's like Native student community and like the NAP. That like really, really helped me. Of course, like talking to my mom, like 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a day. I think I really needed that. And just honestly, I had to really remember why I was there in the first place. And that's something that I'm even coming to understand more as I step into my professional roles and working within my tribe, is remembering why I wanted to go on this journey in the first place, why I said that I wanted to go to school. And ultimately it was because I knew that, and I also have a philosophy that like everyone, like every Native student, or like every Native person in general, has a unique skill set that they can offer to their community. And if we didn't have that, obviously tribes would not even exist. We've always been kind of, a more communal society, or at least where I'm coming from. And so I had really pinpointed my vision early on, knowing that I wanted to be able to offer any sort of skills to my tribe. And so I knew that I was always really good at school. Of course, you kind of get knocked down a little bit, like as an undergrad, especially within your first year. But I was able to really remember why I was there, and it made me just feel more secure in myself, and why I was doing what I was doing. Because I think that if you don't necessarily have that honed in, it can be very, very challenging to stay in a place that is just so new and challenging and discouraging at times. So that's how I really got through it.
Thank you. Cole, do you have?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely echo her in a lot of what she said. I definitely started to get rid of a lot of the homesickness when I started to be more involved with the people in the Native community at OU, and was able to develop some really good friends that served as mentors for me, and really showed me how to navigate campus, how to navigate different obstacles that I was facing my first year, and really showed me how to get involved in things that would progress my college career in a positive way. For example, one of my friends, he had suggested that I apply to do research, and I was able to start research as a freshman, which is really unique. Usually freshmen can't get in that early. And so, and other things just like that. Many mentors just recommended different organizations I should become a part of, just to progress my college career and just look for those new opportunities. And so they really helped me just get rid of that homesickness and refocus on how much of a future I was building.
All right, thank you. I think that kind of moves us into kind of the next kind of area. We talk about what it was like to get on campus, and like the homesickness and finding, trying to find that community. But, there are just in the institution of higher ed, and through this whole journey, there's struggles that we all face. And so if you're comfortable, would you mind sharing maybe some of the struggles that you faced, especially those early years? That first year, what were some of the struggles that you faced, some that you thought you anticipated facing, and some that you didn't even think about that you were going to face? And Cole, we'll go back to you.
Yeah. So in high school, I'd always been a good student, didn't really have to try super, super hard on classes and stuff. But college is very different. There's a lot higher work demand, and the classes can often get overwhelming. And as an engineer, I was confused quite often, and I needed help in a lot of areas for my different classes because they were difficult. And I think that what I struggled with was just finding a good, healthy work-life balance there. I would dive so deep into just the classes and the material, and just trying to get so focused in that I wouldn't take a step back and just reset sometimes, and kind of gather myself again. And yes, that was probably one of the biggest struggles that I had, was just taking a step back every once in a while and trying to just reset.
Okay, great. Amara?
Yeah, I had a lot of issues with imposter syndrome. I did mention earlier that I am first generation. And so I felt that there were a lot of things that I just didn't know. And I was coming from a BIE school. I was surrounded by a lot of my peers who were going to, very expensive private schools and boarding schools on East Coast, which is like very different from like my boarding school experience. People used to ask me what my high school experience was like, and I said I went to boarding school, and they interpreted that as like I went to like Exeter or Andover, and so that was kind of interesting. So I dealt a lot with imposter syndrome, and just being like, well, I don't know if I really deserve to be here, because there were so many things that I was navigating that were just so new to me. Even just being able to talk to a professor was a skill that I definitely like really dove like right into like head first, which like was, I guess, both a good and a very like quick learning experience. But of course, like it did pose some challenges earlier on, and just not being able to have that language at that time to be able to articulately express myself. And that was something that I felt a lot of the students that I was going to school with had already developed as like junior high, as students in that age group. And so that was really tough. And I think also just besides the imposter syndrome, I think it was also battling a lot of stereotypes, because I was in such a, I guess, such an odd place than I had ever been in. The East Coast is definitely something else, and especially the Northeast is just something so different. And while there are a lot of tribal communities that are very much there, and to me as a Native person, I was able to have more access and see how visible that was. But for a lot of people, like non-Native New Englanders, they don't see Native people at all, or they don't really think that the Native people that are on the East Coast, like they wouldn't identify them as that. And so there was just a lot of like stereotypes of what not only they expected the natives within their areas to look like, but as well as like with me, I had a professor tell me, you don't look Native American, you look like part Asian or Hispanic. And I just like didn't know what to say to that, because she said that in front of like my entire class. And it was really weird to have like a white professor try to discount my identity when I knew very much where I was coming from, and that I had always been connected to my community and my family and my culture. So that was definitely very hard to battle stereotypes, and at the same time, trying to believe in myself and really overcome that imposter syndrome, but at the same time still having professors say, well, are you sure you really want to do that, or are you sure that you like you can afford to miss this class? Like, for example, I was, I'm a Gates Scholar in the 2015 cohort. And so when you're a Gates Scholar, you go and you do this orientation. And for the East Coast Gates Scholars, it was in right outside of DC. And it was like 2 weeks into class. And I had a professor who was like, I don't really think you should go to that. You are first generation and you're coming from a reservation and go to a private school. So I just am really worried about whether or not you're going to be able to keep up with your work. And I was only going to be gone for like 3 days, and it was like a weekend, and so like really overcoming all of those stereotypes and the things that people were putting on me. And I'm, of course, like also battling that as well. And then hearing the weird random comments from like my other peers who were like, wow, I thought all you guys were dead, or wow, you're really from a reservation. Like I had someone ask me, what do you wear when you're at home? And so I think that coming from a community, like coming from a reservation, and then being in an all Native school, and then transitioning to that right off the bat was super hard for me to adjust to. And I thought that, I was going to a liberal arts institution, and so I thought that maybe people would be a little bit more open-minded, and unfortunately or like know a little bit more as well, and unfortunately that wasn't the case. So that was really my big challenge coming in my first year.
And I think you say something very important when you talk about imposter syndrome, because many times we can't identify that as Native people. We don't identify that right off the back. We had this discussion a little bit more in depth yesterday in the graduate webinar. So I encourage everyone who's thinking about this issue to go watch that webinar too, on our Facebook page. But kind of bringing just a little bit of that into this, that we didn't know what that concept was, because I echo, and I'm sure Cole will echo some of the things that you're saying too. One of the things, especially for our students that are listening, and even our professional colleagues out there who may be non-Native or want to share this with their non-Native colleagues, Native students belong. We belong in higher ed. Even though, I can go my research side and say, higher education is an institution that was never meant for Black and brown bodies. It wasn't meant for us to be there, nor was it meant for us to excel there. But as Native students who are in and going and have gained access and have access to these institutions across the country, you belong. You belong there. You are smart. You have the ability to succeed there, and you have the resources not only on your campus but in your communities to really begin to help you. And I think it's real powerful for you to say that, Amaya, because it's true. I take my own experience. I felt those same ways, but for the longest time didn't know how to articulate what it was until I was a grad student. And then you start studying imposter syndrome and what that does to student engagement and what that does to connection to your community. And all of a sudden it just was a light bulb, like that was me. And I know that there are probably some students right now listening, or students that will listen to this, that are feeling that way. They feel like they don't belong. They feel, they're sitting in their dorm room or they're sitting in their apartment and they're thinking, what am I doing? If that's you, you do belong. You're not alone. I think one of our panelists yesterday said it best. She thought she was the dumbest one in the class until she started talking to other people. And she said, am I the dumbest one in the class? She said, no, you're not. Trust, like we're all not quite there yet. And so, I think that's an important thing to talk about. And I appreciate you bringing that up. So as we kind of move on here, I want to kind of talk about, we talked about the struggles and we talked about, kind of your experiences. And I think another thing that we need to kind of talk about is those experiences as Native people and how we sometimes have to combat that identity of, okay, yes, I'm Native, but I don't speak for everyone. Or you're often asked in the classroom to, oh, can you speak on behalf of the entire Indigenous population? Do you have any advice for students who may experience that? Do you have any advice for them that, how's the best way to handle it? Or how's the best way to reflect that back and say, that's not my role, or things like that? Amira, we'll start with you.
So I actually have a really funny story now that you bring that up for like in my case, professors wanting me to speak for like all Native people. My first year, actually like my first term at Dartmouth, I had a professor who was, white, and she was just very assumptive of things. She was the same one who told me like in front of the entire class, she thought that I didn't look Native. And then she was also the same one who told me that she didn't think it was a good idea that I go to the Gates Scholars orientation. But there was one particular instance in the class that I was taking with her was a writing seminar, and it was talking about like biracial identity. And of course, a hot topic that comes up and that like non-natives love to assume they know so much about is ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act. And so we were reading the case about baby girl Veronica. And so I didn't say anything the entire class because I was just waiting honestly to see where all of these non-natives were going to interpret this. And I just wanted to see who was going to stick their foot in their mouth, honestly, because that's kind of what I expect some people to do. And it sure did happen that day. And it was probably like 10 minutes left before class. And I hadn't said anything. And she looks directly at me and she was like, so Amara, I noticed you've been really quiet today. What are your thoughts? Like you're actually a Native person. Do you think this is right? And I just told her, I was like, listen, I strongly feel like it is so inappropriate for me to speak on behalf of all Native people. And I like certainly would not like intend to speak on behalf of even like my own tribe. We are all individuals, we're a collective, we're a nation. And so my perspective and my view is one of so many. And I hate, honestly, that when you're in these higher educational institutions, that oftentimes people expect you to speak on behalf of your community. It's just such a unique way. I think that not only Native students have to hold, but like other Black and students of color have to hold to that people expect us to just like be the one representative, the one voice. And when you're living in a society like we do, and like oftentimes native erasure is just like it's so rampant that people, you know, to the point of saying like, I thought you guys didn't exist, or oh, like I didn't know you guys like I didn't know you guys were allowed to leave the reservation, whatever stereotype that may have been. Um, it's still wrong, and having to like take your time and your energy, especially in me in that position, being like a native student in my first year, in my first term, within the first month that I had been there, to put that weight on me, I think is so wrong and inappropriate. And it's definitely something I think a lot of us have experienced, and it's sad that we have to hold this unique weight, because if you were to think about all of the things that you go through to begin with, just even being a first year college student, it's so tough, you know, not even just for native students. It's transitioning into a new environment, learning time management skills, being away from home, trying to interact socially with people you might have never met. There's already so many things that you have to deal with when you're just entering your first year of college. And so to put that on native students and like other Black and students of color is so like inappropriate. So yes, I've definitely dealt with that, and it's just something that I've had to explain very like sometimes very blunt with people, and sometimes I try to be a little bit more kind, I guess, and understanding of where they're coming in from, and just that they might not have the breadth of experience that I have, obviously being a Native woman in an institution like that. It's really sad that, you know, we have to still deal with that. So that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you for sharing those. Cole, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, she really covered a lot. I really echo a lot what she said. Anytime I've been encountered with situations like this, you know, I think all Native people, we're all individuals, and we all offer a very different and meaningful perspective to many different issues. And to when we're tried to be lumped into a big category, you know, we shouldn't have to acknowledge that, and we should just be able to say, you know, everybody's different, and we all bring a different, unique perspective to the table. And yeah.
All right, thank you. Because I think you're both correct. You know, all of our perspectives, and that's one of the things that oftentimes, even as professionals in higher ed, we encounter that on the professional side, that we have to remind our colleagues and our fellow student colleagues that, you know, there are over 570 federally recognized tribes, not including the state recognized tribes in the United States. So that means there are, you know, 500 different languages, histories, peoples, cultures. And, you know, as Native people who walk in this institution of higher ed, we can't speak for everybody. And there's no way that we can be the Indian expert. As you know, we can be, as one of my old mentors used to say, are you an Indian expert, or are you an expert Indian? And you know, we have to be an expert Indian. We're expert. We have expertise in what we do, but we can't be the Indian expert, especially as students. And so I thank you both for those kind of comments and those just those ways to help navigate when a student comes across that. And so before we move to our last question, I just want to remind our attendees who are with us here via Zoom and those that are watching via Facebook, we do have a couple questions in Facebook right now, but now's the time to go ahead and start adding those questions. If you have questions, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A poll in Zoom. If not, you can type if you're watching via Facebook, you can type your questions in the comments, and we'll get to them here after this last question. So my last question really involves it's kind of two parts. So, you know, we talked about what it was like when you first got onto college, to your campus. We talked about the struggles you faced. We talked about navigating those culture shocks. But then the last thing I'd like both of y'all to kind of talk to, one is if there's anything else that you want to add, but two, the things like, what are some of the things you wish you knew? Like if where you're at right now and you could go back to freshman year or first year Cole and first year Mara, what are some of the things you wish you knew heading to college that you think those students who are in that position right now need to hear? Cole, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think going in, you know, I didn't know about the importance of communication that needs to be happened with professors. You know, professors oftentimes, you know, will want you to succeed in their classes and are super willing to help you, you know, office hours or any other times. And there's a really big importance on just having a positive communication and just reaching out. That's something I wish I would have done, is just reached out more to my professors, you know, go to their office hours, you know, the first week of school and meet them and try to put my face with my name on the paper. And, you know, developing that relationship with your professors can be really beneficial for your classes, for your grades. And yeah, so that's what I would recommend.
Thank you so much. Amara?
So I know I talked a little bit about imposter syndrome and just trying to navigate feeling comfortable within, you know, my environment and also kind of stepping into that. But I guess I wish I would have told myself that, like, I know that I still deal with imposter syndrome, like even now in my job. I'm questioning, like, oh my God, I'm so young. I don't really know if I'm supposed to be in, like, you know, these conversations or working on these types of projects. But even taking it back to my undergrad, like, I wish that I would have been a little bit more kind to myself in taking, um, you know, just taking into account like where I was coming from and like the skills that I had prior and just how far I had come. Luckily, I was able to actually really thrive at Dartmouth. I did pretty good. And of course, that was like a learning curve to be able to learn how to operate in that kind of environment. But within that, I still had imposter syndrome holding me back, even though like I was doing well in my grade, even though like I graduated like in the top third of my class. Um, because I think, and it also might be a cultural thing too. I had a really hard time advocating for myself in a sense of saying, you know what, like I am really smart, or you know what, like I am a really good writer, or I'm a really good critical thinker. It was really uncomfortable for me to be able to identify where I'm really striving. But it was so much easier for me to be like, oh my gosh, like maybe I should have said something, like phrased something differently. I just feel like I wish I would have been a lot kinder to myself and acknowledged just how much growth I've actually had done and still continuing to do in, you know, new roles as I transition into new parts of my life. And I also wish that I would have taken a little bit more time to tend to my mental and emotional well-being. Something I learned after graduating from Dartmouth is just like how off kiltered I was, like emotionally and mentally and spiritually. And I joke with, you know, some people at home when I tell them like I had to heal from Dartmouth, because at that point in my life, I was just so focused on work, work, work. And I mean, I did work 3 jobs and I was taking full class schedules and I was doing very good. And eventually on, I learned probably in my sophomore year of college that it was a really great thing to go to office hours. So please do go to office hours and build those relationships and connections with your professors. But even within all of that, I wish that I would have just taken a little bit more time to maintain myself and make sure that I was whole, because sometimes I think like, wow, I did like really good, even though I was like really like off kilter. Imagine how much better I would have done if, you know, there were times where I would have been able to reach out for some of that help, whether it was just me feeling down in whatever, you know, realm that may be. And really just paying attention to your mental health and really destigmatizing that. I think it's a hard thing to talk about within tribal communities. I know I'm trying to always bridge that conversation within my family and also just within my tribal community. You know, like Native people, there's been so much that's happened within all of our collective histories that is so unique. And obviously, we talk a lot about the term historical trauma, and I found out that that was a very real thing. And I think a lot of Native people can kind of tend to go both ways of like, oh, I don't really know if that's such a big thing, or oh my gosh, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I feel the same way. There's just a lot of weight being in some of these types of places and really being able to exert your voice and your stance. And I think you know, you just really got to take care of yourself. You really have to learn to advocate for yourself, and you should feel proud to know that you've made growth in whatever area it might have been, whether you just like got a better grade on one paper, or maybe you learned better communication skills with your professor. Take everything as a huge win and success, and it'll just make your life in college so much easier.
Thank you so much. And I think that's a really good ending point there, is to be able to remind students that you need to find a balance. You need to find a balance between school life and work. Um, it's critical, you know, because again, sometimes we do need to take that time to heal. When we're focusing everything on school and work and we're not taking care of ourselves, whether that's mentally, whether that's physically, emotionally, spiritually, we need to find a balance in ourselves to be able to succeed. Because again, you know, many of us are here, we're not just representing ourselves, we're doing this for ourselves, we're doing this for our families, our communities, our tribes, and we need to be able to put the best self forward. And if you're burning out, if you're burning out in your studies, or you're burning out, you know, trying to balance work and, you know, all your studies, or, you know, your extracurricular activities in there, but you're not taking that time to focus on yourself, um, you're only hurting yourself. And so I appreciate those words that you said, Amara. And so we do have one question. So we have a question from Facebook that I want to bring in real quick. So we have a question from Adarius. So Adarius asks, what do you find yourself doing in your free time now that things like extracurricular activities are limited? So Cole, I'm gonna pass this one to you here.
Okay. Hey Darius, yeah, he's at ASA with me, so I know him pretty well. But I'm actually married, so during my time, I am spending a lot of just family time with my wife, and coronavirus has actually been fun. We've grown in our relationship quite a bit, so it's been good for us.
Yeah, so I'm actually like I did say, I am not really focusing too much on extracurriculars in the conventional sense because I did graduate in 2019. Now that I'm kind of thinking, you know, if I were to compare work to school, I guess what I'm doing outside of my free time, honestly, is just like being outside. You know, it's really nice to enjoy the summer. Luckily, I live in a rural area, so I'm not necessarily as concerned of taking a step outside or hiking up in the mountains as maybe some people who might be in more close quarters with other families and other individuals. So I'm really happy to be doing that. I also kind of re-sparked my passion of reading. And I feel like this is such a common thing that I've been hearing from like not just my friends, but honestly anyone I talk to, people even that I watch on YouTube keep on saying like, wow, I used to really love reading for fun. Like we all loved reading for fun when we were little. And like you kind of forget that when you go into college because it's just like so much reading at once. And honestly, a lot of the time you probably don't want to be doing that reading. And so reading kind of becomes tainted in a sense. But I'm happy that I was able to, after graduating and kind of acclimating into my work life and where I'm at right now, I'm happy that I was able to rekindle that because I've been having a lot of fun and just, I don't know, it's my downtime, it's my quiet time. So I really enjoy that.
All right, well, thank you. And I think that's all the questions that we have right now coming in. Um, if you're watching and you have questions, please still feel free to ask those, and one of our staff members will get back with you and answer them the best that we can. But I just want to thank both Cole and Amara for joining us today. And I want to thank all of our attendees that have been with us through the webinar itself, and all of the people watching on Facebook Live. We want to thank you all for joining us. I definitely want to make sure that you all know that we have resources too here at American Indian Graduate Center. For those that are transitioning into their first year of college, I definitely would encourage you all to go and look at our student resource page at our website, aigcs.org. We have a whole page there that talks about things from exploring majors, effective study skills, transitioning and living on campus. We have a whole section of thriving versus surviving. So like looking at how do you thrive versus just survive. I think that's one of those important things when we talk about the well-being and making sure that we're thinking of ourselves. But also, you can also go to our YouTube page, and we did a series over the summer called our Inspired Podcast, where we talk with a number of professionals and elders and community members from across the country about different topics from mental health, from heart work, from spiritual growth, to business, to empowering Native women. So definitely go and use those as a resource too. And so again, we just want to thank everybody. Thank you for being here. Please make sure to follow us on our social media as we do more of these webinars and more of our programming comes out. We just want to thank everyone. And again, I've been your moderator for today, Dr. Corey Still. I just want to say, well, thank you.